The world has lots of problems: diseases, hunger, poverty, war, and climate change. Every one of these is an important issue and should be addressed with a sense of alacrity. However, the most urgent need, in my opinion, is the realization that this is the only home we have and that we must pass it on to our future generations as clean as our parents had given it to us. That is, we must work on reducing carbon emission and ensure that the ambient temperature does not go up. That's why reducing fossil fuels and enhancing the use of solar and wind power become very critical to the survival of this planet. Please do so. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. India is one of the oldest civilizations with a rich heritage and culture building over the centuries. In recent times, our generations have lost connection with it. We are attracted to modern cultures borrowed from other lands. It is time we find our roots and be proud of what our ancestors have created for us. Our discussion now is on reclaiming our heritage and culture with our esteemed guests. We welcome to our studio Dr. Alka Pande, Mr. Francois Gautier, and Mr. Dipankar Mukherjee, who will lead the discussion. Dr. Alka Pande is an art historian, author, and curator with 2 post graduation degrees, one in history and the second in history of art, followed by a PhD in art history and a postdoctorate in critical art theory from University of London. She has authored numerous books and curated many national and international exhibitions. She built the collection of Indian artists for the SL Museum, Vienna, Austria. A prolific writer, Pandey has also authored a number of books on Indian art and culture. As artistic director of Photosphere, an initiative of the India Habitat Center, Pandey brought in the environment and photographic practice together as a public arts project. Pandey was the project director of the first ever Bihar Museum Biennale 2021. Currently, Dr. Pandey is a consultant art advisor and curator of the Visual Arts Gallery, India Habitat Center, New Delhi. Francois Gautier was the political correspondent in South Asia for 10 years at Le Figaro, France's largest daily. He is now the editor-in-chief of the Paris-based La Revue de Land, published by Les Éditions de l'Harmattan. Francois has written several books on India, a Western journalist on India, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, a Guru of Joy, an entirely new history of India, and many more. Francois is also building a museum of Indian history in Pune. Dipankar Mukherjee is the publisher and director of Readomania, one of India's youngest traditional publishing houses. Under his leadership, the house has produced over 100 books in just about 5 years, with some critically acclaimed titles as well. He is an engineer and holds an MBA degree from IIT Madras and had been in the corporate world for 9 years before becoming an entrepreneur. Let's start the discussion, handing over the virtual mic to Mr. Dipankar Mukherjee.
Thank you, Renu, for the lovely introductions. Dr. Pande, Francois, welcome to the discussion. It's a pleasure to be in a conversation with both of you. And I really look forward to having an enlightening discussion on the topic at hand. Before I jump into the topic per se, I wanted to check with you on one point. Would it be right to say India is the only country or civilization that has a rich body of work that goes back to more than 5,000 years? Francois, we can start with you and then Dr. Pandey.
Yeah, I would say more because can you hear me?
I think you're logged in with two devices, Francois, which is why they're echoing. So maybe you can shut down one of the devices. Did you
Okay,
log in
no
through a
problem.
laptop and a mobile?
Can you hear me?
There is a lot of echo.
There's a lot of echo. One second. Let me move.
Meanwhile, as the Francois is getting sorted, Dr. Pandey, what do you have to say about the whole thing of
There's a problem. Is there a problem in
no,
the?
now we are all good.
Okay. So all I can say is yes, India is one of the countries which has a civilization 5,000 years. But what about the Egyptian civilization, which goes back also in antiquity, and also the Mayan civilization? So to say that India is the only country which goes back 5,000 years ago, I wouldn't be so confident.
But it is one of the countries that is
Yes,
going back.
definitely.
So
One of the few countries.
if that is the case, what do you think is the reason why we as a population based in the country are not taking our body of work so seriously? Even though lately a lot has been done to reclaim or revisit our past glory, do you think people take us and our civilizational knowledge, collective resources seriously?
You know, the sad thing, Dipankar, is that the Indophiles across the globe place far greater value on Indic wisdom and what India brings to the world. Unfortunately for us, we have taken our civilization for granted. And because in India you kick a stone and a jewel of cultural heritage, whether it's tangible or intangible, whether it is our books of knowledge, the Vedas, the Upanishads, or the huge amount of vernacular literature, Sanskrit literature, we have so much of it. But somewhere along modernization, and because we had been under the rule of our colonizers for more than 200 years, we somehow have lost a lot. But as you rightly said, in the last many years, we are reclaiming and bringing back the wonder that is India, the wonder that was India, and the wonder that will be India.
That's wonderful. I think you've put in a very nice and succinct way. But I think there could be a flip side to the whole reclaiming and revisiting. Do you think or do you feel that in the current frenzy of this entire episode of revisiting our past glory, a lot of it is being misinterpreted or misquoted?
So, what happens, Dipankar, is whenever there is a big churning happening, there are always the pluses and the minuses. So, when this kind of churning and a reclaiming is happening, there are many people who are not so literate or not so knowledgeable, but they are very passionate. And activism sometimes can also have two sides of the same coin. So, these are challenges which we have to face. And I think that there is a lot of maturity and a lot of wisdom which is present in India, and that is what will see us through the challenges of reclaiming the very slogan of activism, which is sometimes a lot without knowledge. That itself will fall off, and mature minds and the reclaiming of our great past will be done with sensitivity, maturity, and wisdom. I'm a positivist.
That's wonderful. But if that is the case, what, according to you, is the best way to look at our past and
Again, it
understand
has
the
started.
relevance?
Hmm.
Is it better now? I think it's better now. So,
Yeah.
since Francois is back, I will throw the question back at him as well. So, Francois, I was asking Dr. Pandey that do you feel that in the current frenzy of revisiting our past glory, a lot of it has been misinterpreted or misquoted?
No,
Oh,
absolutely. I
absolutely.
mean, there is some
There is
problem
some
with my
problem with my
connection.
connection.
I think there is a significant echo happening at your end. Maybe uh, you,
So, Dipankar, maybe you and I should continue
yeah, let's
because
do. Yeah,
I
while
also
he's
need
setting
to.
it up, yes, yes, no
Yeah.
problem. So,
Because you could do my bit and then do the other
yes,
bit.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That
So,
may work.
coming back to what I was asking you, then what is the best way to look at our past and understand the relevance of that culture and heritage? Would you suggest an ideal method in a way?
I think education is very important. I think the reading of texts is very important. I think introducing vernacular and our literature of the land, the rereading of it, and all aspects of it should become part of the university system. And reading is very important. Promotion of Sanskrit is important, and re-looking, and as I keep mentioning, rereading of our classical texts become important. Understanding the past in a mature way becomes important, and not just, I think we should keep religion out of culture. And once we do it with the right amount of cultural readings, that will feed into the understanding of the inclusive, plural culture of the land. I think bringing religion into everything is not such a good idea, because religion is something personal. We keep it to our homes and our hearts. And the reading of all texts, both religious, secular, and non secular texts, is also important.
Coming to another point, what you mentioned, you spoke about reading a lot, but isn't reading itself subjective, because the texts have been written thousands and thousands of years ago and had a different context? So when somebody is reading it, would they, is there a chance that they misinterpret or miscontextualize the content that was developed for a population or a time and age which is thousands of years ago?
Well, that's a very valid point. And I do think that whatever be the interpretation, it is also important to have debates and discussions. Because if you looked at our Indic past, we had a lot of debates and discussions. The aestheticians sat together, debated, and confabulated. And platforms like that are important. So when people are reading, it is also important to come on platforms like a platform that we are on currently, and have debates and discussions, and agree to disagree or agree to agree. These are important ecosystems in which a mature understanding of our past can take place.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because my next question is even more tricky. What I want to know from you is that why reclaim everything from the past? Why not create something new?
Historian, and I believe in the importance of the historical narrative. Till we don't understand our past and the present that we are in, how can we create anything new? Nothing grows in a vacuum. Nothing, not even a flower, can grow in a vacuum. So we have to have the right soil, the fertile soil, which is over years and layering of history, that we have to understand, we have to ingest, and then create a new ecosystem.
Well, on that point, I'm going to give you an example. Okay, a lot of scientific resources right now are being used to revalidate our Ayurveda principles. Now, don't you feel that is a lot of wastage on the scientific resources on trying to reprove or revalidate what we already know for centuries? Why should we not invest that in creating something new instead of revalidating something which is already known?
But this is all process based, Dipankar. If the scientific people did not waste their energies revalidating, would you be saying that? These are all processes we have to go through. And I believe that Ayurveda itself had a particular science, but over the years there was a kind of mixing and intermixing where steroids and other things. I'm not really a medicine person, but as an observer, I feel that there were drawbacks in that. But if we go back into the science of Ayurveda, we will see that there is a huge scientific process to that. And if people are arguing on that, let them argue and let them find, because still you do not investigate. How are you going to, just not bring that into your ecosystem? How can you discard anything without really following the scientific process?
So in I will bring Francois also at this point in. So Alka, are you also saying that what our ancestors did in terms of process was not strong enough a proof, and hence we have to reprove all of it with modern science?
No, I don't agree with you at all, Dipankar, on that. I think what our forefathers and ancestors did was based a lot on the research of the times. It had a scientific, rational thinking. And I think that it is as relevant today as it was then, but with certain changes because the ecosystems are changing and we have to be abreast with the times. I will definitely say that there was a lot of rational thought, scientific temperament in pre modern past as it is today.
Very well said. Francois, bringing you at that point, we were discussing about the whole idea of using our modern scientific resources to revalidate our past instead of using scientific resources for something new. What is your opinion on that?
First, I wanted to go back a little bit about the 5,000 years. I am not a historian, but my research has shown that Indian history is much older than 5,000 years, that the British, for their own interest, post-dated most of Indian history's landmarks like the Vedas, like Sanskrit. And it's also based on false theories like the Aryan invasion theory, which is still dividing India. So I would push back the ancientness of Indian history. Now, the second thing is, I don't know if the word reclaiming is right, because what had happened in 1947 that Mr. Nehru, for good and bad reason, chose to sweep under the carpet much of Indian history and spiritual inheritance. So what is needed today is re-education, is reintroducing Indianness into the education of Indian children and Indian students, because basically what Indian students and children are studying today is a colonized history. It's a colonized curriculum. You know they become fluent in maybe in high tech, in IT, or engineers, but they don't have any Indianness in them. As a Frenchman, I was taught about my poets, my warriors, the Indian education makes Indian students good for export. We see in Ukraine that the majority of students there are Indian. Of course, there are many reasons, reservations, the problem of colleges that ask for fees. I know all this problem, but nevertheless, I don't see that Indian students, the youth of India, is made proud to be Indian. Now, of course, in that Nehruvian outlook, there, it is called saffronization. But no. I mean, unless you make your children proud to be Indians, how can they compete? How can they work for India? How can they contribute to this great country which is India? Because they have no culture. Now the world culture has become very generalized. Also, Bharatnatyam, little bit of Veda, little bit of Upanishad, but basically Indian culture is not taught. The great warriors, Maharana Pratap, Shivaji Maharaj, Rani Kito Chennamma of Karnataka, Arya Barolka, they're not taught. You say Shivaji in the South, people think that you're talking about the South Indian movie star. So there's a lack of culture into Indian children, and what is needed is re-education, not reclaiming, because it's all there. No, you don't reclaim something which is already there. You need to reintroduce it into curriculums and Indianize the curriculums at universities, which are only producing, to my mind, Western clones. People, Indians were very brilliant into aping is a bit stronger, but into aping the Western culture, and often look down upon their own spirituality and culture. And I find it very sad because I'm a white man who came to India, loved this country, adopted this country, but I see that most Indians want to go abroad. They want to go to the US. Every upper middle class parents want to send their children abroad because they're not rooted in their own culture. So that's my point.
Very interesting and very well laid out, Francois. I think I have a question for both of you. So, if I look at the journey of India's revisiting the past, or in general terms, reclaiming and going back to our ancestral or ancient knowledge, how would you say, or what would you say are the good, bad, ugly of our journey, India's journey, in that process of revisiting our past in the last 10 years, maybe?
You're asking me or you're asking Alka?
I'm asking you, and then I'll go to Alka.
So I think the first thing is to rewrite Indian history as it happened, because there are, it is not that it is unknown. There are many facts. Like, for instance, that famous Aryan invasion theory that says that white people from Russia came and colonized the Dravidians and the tribal people in the north and slowly pushed them back and imposed upon them the Hindu religion and the gods and Sanskrit, has been proved absolutely false. There are so many discoveries, scientific, that show that it never happened. And even people like Romila Tapar or Irfan Habib, who were staunch defenders of that theory, have taken a step back and said, okay, maybe it didn't happen, maybe aliens went westwards. But it is still there in every history book, whether they're Indian, whether they're foreign, and it's still dividing India. The DMK in Tamil Nadu still says, we are the original inhabitants of India. We are the Dravidians. We reject Sanskrit, we reject Hindu religion, we reject Brahmins, we reject the North. So it is dividing India. In Maharashtra, if you go to the tribals who are getting converted to Christianity, the Christian missionaries tell them, you are the first inhabitants of India. The others are just important. Convert to the true religion, convert to Christianity, because you are the original inhabitants. You've been persecuted by the Aryans, by the Brahmins. So it's extremely important, and I don't know why after 7.5 years, Mr. Modi, a man I admire a lot, has not asked his, the 4 different ministers of culture, of education, to change this theory, to remove it from history books. Because it changed the whole outlook of India. The entire outlook saying that, the white man came, colonized you, 5,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, and then came again and brought democracy and brought railways.
I will, okay, hold on to that point over here. Alka, are you there? Alka?
Yes, I'm there. And I
Yeah.
would like to go back to what Francois said a little time before. I wouldn't like to brush India in one general way. I'm an Indian. I've learned Indian dance, Indian music. My mother was a trained singer. So to brush Indians all and say we don't know about our culture, I don't agree with that at all. When you look at the Deep South, there is a huge tradition of learning the Indian traditional arts, and the Indian traditional arts and the Sahitya keep us rooted to our tradition and culture. I don't think it is fair to say that we've only read colonized books. I'm a student of history, we have read both the Western and Indian writers, and we are reading a lot of our Indian texts. We have a lot of books like Peggy Mohan has written on interpreting language. There is Balram Shukla, who's writing and looking at Prakrit, Sanskrit, and Persian. There's lots happening. So India is not a just a nation. It's actually a confederation of many identities put together. And to just put it as one thing to say that we are not knowing our culture and we are only reading the Western white studies, I would not agree with it. I would beg to disagree. And I would say that there are a lot of us, and I agree, don't say reclaiming. Well, we are revisiting, we are relooking, we are reinterpreting. And this is what happens in a huge civilization like ours and in different civilizations. These challenges we have to take, and we are handling them.
Okay, I will bring out a very important point here to you, Alka. Francois mentioned the Aryan invasion theory and how it has been debunked. My question to you is that what is your opinion on the Aryan invasion theory?
Well, definitely, people have been coming from different communities. We are not just the indigenous people, and there's a lot of work being done on it. And I don't want to really make a commitment on that because that is not my area of expertise. But I do believe that we consist of different tribes, different communities, different cultures, which is coming into one nation called India. And that is very important for all of us to understand that we are a plural culture, we are culturally diverse, and we, in each state, there is such a difference between a person living in the deep south to a person living in the northeast to a person living in Kashmir to a person living in Rajasthan and in central India. These are very, this I find my country extremely fascinating and extremely challenging, and I'm still at my age discovering so many wonderful things about this country. And there are so many people like us who are so proud to be living in such a diverse culture, which is in a state of constant change and flux. And I
Alka,
don't
we would
like
love to
the
see your
fact that we are
face. So can
brushed
you hold the
aside.
camera slightly away from your face? We love to see you more when you talk. You're holding your
Yeah.
camera too close.
I'm a
So
white man.
that's it. And now,
I'm a
Dipankar,
Frenchman.
because there's been such a long thing, I had kept this time. I'm traveling, as you know, and I'll have to beg off. But I will be tuned in, but I will not be able to speak because I'm losing connection now.
Thank you so much for being with us,
Thank you,
Dr. Pande.
Dipankar.
It was a
Thank you.
pleasure having you in the
Lovely to
conversation.
have heard
Yeah.
Francois's conversations as well. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Francois, coming back to you, we heard what she said, okay, and we
Yeah.
heard what you said in alien invasion theory. My point of view is slightly different. See, we've had a journey. The country, India, has probably woken up to the fact that we need to fight for our own heritage. So, when I say reclaim or when we talk about being reclaiming, we are reclaiming all the scientific patents to all the science that belongs to us, be it Ayurveda, be it our homegrown basmati rice, so on and so forth. So that's all about reclaiming, revisiting, as you rightly said, going back to our own text and rereading and read them. My question to you was, as an outsider, as a white man who's come to India and seen us kind of work back towards our past, how do you see us do it? Good, bad, ugly, of the process that we are using to do it.
No, I mean, I disagree with Alka profoundly. As you said, I'm a white man, Catholic born, Catholic educated. So I can't be accused of jingoism when I say India is a great country. It has a great history. Okay, there are dark parts of it. Now, unless you look at your own history squarely, you cannot have a nation that progresses. And I think India is not looking at its own history. If you read in Indian history books, the Mughals were invaders, whatever is said about the Mughals, were invaders who came from outside, who people like Maharana Pratap or Shivaji Maharaj felt, they were people to be fought because they were foreigners invading India, imposing their own culture, their own religion. Now, these are glorified in Indian history books, whereas people like Shivaji Maharaj was an extraordinary man in terms of. I am a Frenchman. Napoleon is our military hero. I have to say. So there are many museums on Napoleon. I'm born in Paris near the Napoleon Museum. It's a huge place. very, glorify Napoleon. There are books on Napoleon every year. There are films. But in India, Shivaji Maharaj is considered, he's got five lines in history books, whether Indian history books. I'm talking about Indian history books. Whereas Aurangzeb was a monster to his own family, poisoned his father, beheaded his brother Dara Shikoh, who was an enlightened Sufi, imprisoned his son, and wrote his will saying that never trust your sons. Who was a man, who was definitely not a good person, is glorified. So unless you rewrite your history books, how will you make your children proud? I lecture in American universities. The last lecture I did before COVID was in Atlanta University. There are 3,800 Indians in Atlanta University, and I gave a lecture on the importance of rewriting in history. Out of 3,800, 11 of them came from my lecture. Although it is not a question of me, it's a question that the focus of the parents of Indians and their children is education. It is good, but Western education. Let us send our children to America. They get diplomas, then they settle there because they get a better pay there. It is true that it's not easy to in India to do business. So they settle there. The children are born there. The children are born Americans. Gone. They're gone. The greatest brain drain in the world is of Indians, of Hindus for that matter. 60% of Silicon Valley engineers, 55% of British doctors, some of the biggest CEOs of the world, like Google, are Indians. Why? Why can't this talent be in India, contribute to India's growth? Because India needs to become a superpower, an economic superpower. Forget about Bharatnatyam and this vague Nehruvian culture that limits Indian culture to something that is acceptable to all Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jains. No, no. Indian culture is Indian culture. It's an ancient Indian culture, an ancient spirituality that said the world is one family. So how can you treat this ancient spirituality as something which is one-sided? No, so you need a revolution. You need a revolution in India to to reclaim that ancient culture, because there is so much opposition, not only of the Muslim community, not only of the Christian community, who will say, oh, yoga is Hindu, pranayama. My wife and I teach pranayama. It's a very ancient knowledge in India, and as Sri Ravi Shankar says, breath has no religion. The air you breathe is not Muslim, not Christian. So if you teach pranayama to children, you can teach to anybody, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Jain, a Sikh. But if you try, we tried teaching to Christians, and they said, no, this is Hindu, we don't want. So you need a revolution if you want to reclaim your ancient history, your ancient inheritance. You have to rewrite every Indian history book. You need to get rid of of the Aryan invasion and so many things. You need
Okay,
to
so
reclaim your heroes, reclaim your heroines,
I will
reclaim.
have to, yeah, bring in a disclaimer here, Francois. I think you have made quite a few valid points, but maybe you stretched it a little too far on a lot of aspects. I will probably counter just a few of them. Number one, discarding the entire Nehruvian past may not be a great idea, because when our country was born in 1947 and we were progressing the first few decades of our newborn status, the focus was more on alleviating poverty, developing the country, and bringing in institutions for long term growth, which probably was a bigger focus than at that time, maybe, to so-called reclaim or revisit what we all assumed was a part of our lives. Nobody would ever have thought that Ayurveda and our basic principles, like using turmeric in our food, will have to be taught to somebody. So at that time, that was not the objective. As we progressed further and we globalized and the world opened up to us, we started adapting ourselves to Western methods purely for commercial and economic gains. Nothing to do with culture, nothing to do with our intent of staying back or not. We saw opportunities, we saw better money, and we moved on to those greener pastures. It is now that India, as a homegrown country, has also become a fertile land for earning enough and more for our own ambitions, that we are looking back at things that we probably have lost focus on in our journey in the last couple of decades, and which is where people are revisiting that past in a bigger and better way. That's one. Second, on the textbook context, I do agree that rather a lot of our textbooks are written from what the British world taught us to see in our history, and a lot has been over time corrected and revisited. History textbooks and rather our curriculum cannot be changed overnight. It's a slow and a gradual process, and I strongly believe that all the government initiatives in that direction are showing positive results, and we are going to get back to what is ideal very soon. Having said these 2 points, I'm going to go back to another question that I have around another important point of conservation. We have heritage in terms of architecture, in terms of physical manifestation, buildings, temples, forts, etc., etc. What role do you think conservation of these historic sites plays in the entire process of reclaiming and revisiting our past?
Well, of course, there is a bit of progress in conservation. I think since Mr. Modi came to power, there is a more focus on conserving India's physical inheritance, the palaces, the Ghats of Benares, etc., etc. But compared to the West, you see, America has, in United States has such a short history, but how keen they are to conserve even that short history, or how keen they are to conserve even the cowboy legends and things that are of not much interest. In India, I don't see that. I don't see that. I see that there is no love for all things. The old houses are broken, whether it's in Rajasthan or Pondicherry. The old houses are broken to make place for these ugly concrete bankers, that you see all over India. It's only maybe the five-star hotels, people like the Tatars who, because Westerners lack this ancient India. So in their palaces, in their hotels, they have recreated something. But you talk about Nehru, but I'm sorry, in economy, it's a catastrophe. You look at China; it is 20 years ahead of India in terms of being proud, in terms of bringing back the brain drain of the Chinese. The Chinese also had a brain drain, so the Chinese managed to bring them back, to make them proud. Even if they were Christians, Chinese in America, they came back to China, they invested. But in India, it's a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe. The infrastructures, I'm in Udaipur now. The roads in Udaipur are so terrible. The railways are still going 50 kilometers an hour. So forget about culture. It's a whole Nehruvian concept which warp the mind of even the most brilliant people of this country. The intelligentsia, I'm sorry to say, the intelligentsia of India has a colonized mind. Even if it's brilliant like Dr. Alka Pande, it's just a colonized mind that looks at Indian culture, okay, a little bit of Veda, a little bit of that, point of view. The problem of Indian culture is that this westernized mind, this colonized mind, is always critical of India. It's always critical of anything in India. And I'm Westerner saying, what a wonderful country, what a wonderful people, what a wonderful spirituality. Now, let's talk about yoga. You're talking about culture, let's talk about yoga. How come in America, yoga is being introduced in some school to children, yoga, pranayama, and in India, it is not even there. The country of birth of yoga, of pranayama, of asanas, of meditation, what the Westerners call mindfulness now, which is fashionable. How come it is not there in Indian school? From
No,
kindergarten.
Francois, okay, please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have to hold you there. I have to hold you there. I think that's a very myopic view that you have. It is not that we've never had yoga around us. What
Excuse
you
me,
see,
since 1947, is there any yoga in schools, Indian schools? Please tell
yes,
me. No.
yes. Please
No.
hold on. My point of view.
Okay.
What
Okay.
you are looking at is a very urban view of India. Okay. What you're looking at is what our private education structure has been showing. Okay. Yoga has been a part of our life in our rural setting for many, many more years. They may not be calling it yoga, they may not be calling it what you're calling it, but it is a part of it. Yes, what needs to be done is brought in more structure. Okay, I don't say that yoga was taught in the America in a nice and foolproof way. It is Indians who went there and the Westerners who picked up those concepts. I would go ahead and say that they stole the concepts from us and rebranded them. I'm not going in that debate at all. My point to you is that you very well mentioned that we need to do a lot of effort and work to justify all those pointers to us, which is
But
happening.
in government school, it is nowhere. In government school, which are the majority of schools in rural areas, and in cities,
Okay, I think we lost him for a while, and as long as he's coming back, I would probably want to make this point that Francois has definitely got a point of view, and we have a long way to go in developing what is core to us as an Indian. But I do definitely not agree to what he mentions, and we don't respect and we don't value what we have. So, as I understand and as I know, yoga has been a part of our culture for a long, long time. It's just that it was never formalized and brought in. We've had yoga ashrams, we've had a part of it in a lot of other ways. Having said that, I'd also strongly believe that the priorities of a nation changes from time to time. In 1947, when we were formed, in the early days, our priority was not probably yoga, was probably more about food, clothing, and shelter, and basic education. As we moved higher up in the value chain, when we took care of the food part, the shelter part, the basic education part, is when we can add value, the value education part. And that's how we are slowly progressing. So we
no,
have, I think, chalked
I
out
did.
a very well laid out path. Francois, you're back. You were saying something when we lost you.
Yeah, yeah, I disagree because if you look at China, they started the same way as India with poverty, overpopulation. But today, look at China. They have a bullet train. They have every small city has an airport. Look at them in the Winter Olympics of just finished in Beijing. The amazing technology, the amazing everything was on par with the West. I mean, even better. I think there had never been such brilliant Winter Olympics since it started. So India started the same with an Nehruian system, and how come today India is lagging 20 years behind China in terms of economy, in terms of success, industrialization, in terms of export? You know, there is there is nothing. Indians don't manufacture any hardware, any computer, any of international standards. How is it possible? Please tell me. I mean, I'm a lover of India, but it hurts me that these policies of are continuing of subsidy of reservation. So the socialist policies that have failed are still implemented today by the BJP
I,
government because
I
they bring votes and everything is about votes today.
India is one of the largest democracies in the world. There is no comparison that India can have with China. China is a closed economy, is opaque. There is no information
It's
coming out.
free
So we
state.
really do not know
It's a
what
free state.
exactly
I
China
think
does
it's free
inside to its industry. For example, I'm sorry, I'm overruling you here. For example, the amount of tax rebate given by China to its industry to build scale without looking at the economic benefits or losses is something which is uncalled for. The entire industry can fall apart if there is not enough demand, which probably you've noticed that China is going through right now. Okay, as compared to that, India's growth has been far more wider. India's growth is a SME based story. In the last 20 years, Indian SMEs have grown one of the fastest in the world. Now, having
state.
said, each government has its own priorities and agenda. So while probably in the 21st century, the first decade went in focusing on SMEs, the second decade may have gone in building scale. So we do not know what's coming up as yet. For example, the current policy of government of bringing in a PLI scheme, which focuses on scale, would technically show benefits of scale. So we do not know what future holds for us. What I can definitely say is that our priorities as a country have been changing over time, and we have done what could have been done best. Our situation in poverty alleviation, our situation in managing hunger, I believe we have done a great job of it. And keeping in mind our ability to hold back to our culture, it's not that we've completely obliterated our culture. We have managed to hold on to our roots, and which is the reason why the entire element is coming back. As you rightly pointed out, yoga is coming back. And how? India went back and got UN to declare a World Yoga Day. So things are changing. Things are coming in a good way. And I really appreciate the fact that somebody who's come from outside the country like you is talking such positive things about us, about our culture, about the heritage that we have of more than 5,000 years. And we carry it forward with a lot of pride. Anyways, coming back to the point that I was coming, which is probably one of the last ones in our discussion today, and you slightly touched upon it, but I'd like to like you to elaborate more on it. Is what should be the role of government, of civil society, and individuals in this entire process of managing our culture or bringing back, as you say, what has not been brought back?
No, so only the government can bring that revolution. There is nobody else that can. And I think only Mr. Modi, with a honest, non-corrupt, powerful man with a vision, can do it. Um, because the revolution, as I said, it's my point of view, and I may be wrong. Revolution is needed if you need to produce Indian youth who are proud to be Indians, and we will stay in India and contribute to India's growth to make again India a great country. Because let me say it again, I'm not a lover of China. I'm a lover of the Tibetans and the Dalai Lama, and I'm aware of the genocide that the Chinese have done, not only towards the Tibetans, but even unto themselves when Mao Zedong did his disastrous cultural revolution. But in every sphere, the Chinese are way ahead of India. I mean, the whole Nehruvian concept of economy that you are praising is a total failure. I don't think it has improved much the standard of living in the poor, amongst the poor. Of course, there is improvement, but not to the extent that the Chinese have produced. So only the government can produce a revolution, but does it have the will? As I said, I have met 4 ministers of education since Mr. Modi came to power, and none of them have dared touch things like the alien invasion theory or demoting a little bit the glorification of the Mughals and promoting true Indian heroes like the Americans promote Washington Monument. It has not been done. So who will have the courage? Because you're saying India is a great democracy, the greatest in the world, and it is true. But at the same time, democracy has become a yoke in India. Every time, every leader, including Mr. Modi, needs to have an eye on the next election, rural election, UP election, general election. So
I think we lost
elections in India.
Once again, and there he comes back. Yeah, carry on.
No, so what I'm saying, India is the greatest democracy. It's true, but it's also a cliche. It's a yoke. It's a shackles, because every leader in India has an eye on the next elections, and we know that elections in India cost enormous amounts of money, because in the tradition in the tradition, you have to dole free gifts. You have to have 100 cars caravan when you come. You need huge crowds to attend your meeting. So it costs enormous amount of money, of manpower, and it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. There should be one election, general elections, and the same time state election. Over, then you have 5 years to govern, to look after the people of India who elected you, not to look after your own party or to have an eye on the next election and collect money, the enormous amounts of money that you need, and that probably half of them is collected in the black. So yes, India, greatest democracy, but also I wish it would be a more streamlined democracy. And again, we come back to that colonized Indian mind that thinks that I need to do better than the West. I need to be more American than the American. I need to be more democratic than the Democrats. No, it is not true. I need to be an Indian. I mean, democracy has to be adapted to the Indian psyche. Indian psyche is different from the Western psyche. You can't call, people call, Mr. Modi a right wing, but right wing is a Western label. We need to have Indian labels on Indian people. We need to, I say we because I'm not an Indian, but India needs to recreate, its own identity and taking the best of the West. I'm not rejecting the West. I'm saying that aping the West in every manner, however brilliantly, is not going to bring India forward, because we see that the Chinese are Chinese. They're proud to be Chinese. Maybe it's overboard, maybe they're jingoistic, but still, it makes the Chinese great athletes. It makes the Chinese great athletes. We see in India that there's only one thing, it's cricket. Every other sport is eclipsed by cricket, because the entire media attention, the entire sponsorship, the entire government is on cricket. So if you're an athlete, running 400, 1500 meters or 5,000 meters, which is an extremely demanding sport, I have done it, extremely demanding. You travel second class, and you go to stadium which are empty. Well, if you're a cricketer, 11 cricketer, part of the 11 cricketers, you travel 5-star, first class, you make crores of rupees for 3 lifetimes. So again, colonial mind in cricket, however good game it is, it's a colonial game. It's a British game. So India needs to recreate its own identity rather than reclaim. I would say recreate its identity. Take the best of the West. Yes, take the best of the West. But we see in the West that the many failures also. That the West is looking for answers, and many Westerners come to India, come to spirituality, come to yoga, come to meditation, come to
So
pranayama, come to
I'm
Ayurveda to find an answer.
I think that's a very well structured argument, which I completely do not agree with. But thank you for the point that you mentioned here. I will make a few responses here. You talk about India aping the West. Well, West also apes us, specifically in spirituality. Ever since the time Vivekananda went and gave his lecture in the World Conference of Religions. Ever since then, spirituality and the Indian form of spirituality has been exposed to the world. I can confidently say that the world is aping us in spirituality. Number one. Number two, a lot of points, I believe what you're talking about are slightly historical, and you may have to review your information over the last 5 years, what has been done. For example, in sports, yes, you are absolutely right. India is mad about cricket, and that has nothing to do with the fact that cricket is a Western game or an Indian game. It's a game that India is madly in love with, as simple as that. But over the last 5 years, there are so many other sports that have been brought to the limelight. And if I only wish that I had another friend of mine who is in SAI who could come forward and give you the entire list of investments India has made in developing sports other than cricket. So that's also another area which is, I completely agree to a lot of things that you said, but they're historical in nature. And what we have done as a body of work in the last 5 to 10 years is phenomenal in multiple aspects. So, yes, on that note, I think we do not have much time left here, and we are almost towards the end of the discussion. So, Francois, it was lovely having you on chat, and I think we've got a good point of view on what you mentioned about what India needs to do and where we come from as a background. So, thank you on that. And Renu, over to you now for closing comments. Do we have Renu here by any chance? Yeah. Renu, you're on mute. Yeah. Now it's better.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your enlightening discussion that helped us in opening the closed windows of our minds. Thank you, Dr. Alka Pande, Mr. Francois Gautier, and Mr. Dipankar Mukherjee of Readomania for being IFSI guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.